right, here we go in 3, 2, 1. Have you ever wondered if long COVID is real? Have you seen the hashtags and said, are they just out of shape, or is this actually something serious? Do I need to learn more about this? How can I deal with this? Am I struggling with it? Well, I've actually had some questions. I've never tested positive for COVID, but man, after a friend of mine was exposed and then I felt sick the next few days and I tested negative, I was just really struggled to run or do anything athletic. And I'm just like, this is really interesting because I've seen my friend Daria talking about long COVID for almost 2 years. Well, actually, just recently, 2 years she's had COVID and been dealing with symptoms from COVID for 2 years. So this is sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/long COVID. And Daria Oler has been on the podcast many times before. And over the last 2 years, she's chronicled on social media her stories, her experience of long COVID. And she is joining today to continue the conversation as we discuss with athletic trainers. She's presented recently at the San Diego Pain Summit and Athletic Trainers of New Jersey, Athletic Trainer Society of New Jersey, talking about long COVID and the effects there and what she's learned and what we need to know as athletic trainers. So Daria, welcome back. And again, congratulations on making progress or benefiting society with your struggles.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's always a good conversation. So one of the big things is, I'm sure you've heard, Daria, you're just out of shape. You're just deconditioned, right? So you just got sick and then just never really got back in shape. So we're going to cover that, but let's start with a working definition of long COVID. How would you define that, or how is that being defined in the medical community?
Yeah, so there isn't one set formal definition yet, and it will kind of depend on where you look. Like from the World Health Organization, their definition as of October says that if you have symptoms after a COVID infection, and it can be confirmed or not confirmed, that are at least 3 months past that initial infection, and that can include the big symptoms are fatigue, which is crippling fatigue, breathlessness, and brain fog. Those are a couple of the big ones they talk about. But then we also know from the CDC, they're saying it could be you're seeing a change in symptoms. So you can either have like this new onset of symptoms you've never had before. You can see kind of like maybe you had a condition a really long time ago, like a good example is asthma, and all of a sudden you're like, this is back. I haven't dealt with this for a long time. Or maybe it's a chronic condition you've had ongoing and things have worsened, because long COVID seems to be kind of causing that to happen too. So it's the general thing is that, you had a known or unknown, which is fun, COVID infection, and then there's just these symptoms that continue. And we don't necessarily know why it happens yet. Some of the working theories are there could be a viral persistence, which means your body never fully cleared the virus and there's still some lingering in there. And that's a theory, maybe why, we don't know, maybe why the vaccine seems to temporarily help some people. There's a theory it could be autoimmune related and you're producing autoantibodies, which aren't great. There could be a reactivation of a past virus. Like the most common one being studied now is Epstein-Barr, which like 90% of people have had. So we don't know exactly why it's happening or who's likely to get it, but it seems like you have a COVID infection and then you have these symptoms that continue on.
All right. So that's I guess even it's just part of the conversation. That's what we need to know is there's not a clear cut, okay, yes, you tested positive, you have long COVID. Right. No, it's, and here in the secondary setting, we get kids that don't tell us because if they test positive, then they have to, stay at home for 5 days and then they miss sports for another 5 days and then they have to go through reconditioning periods. Oh, they're like, no, I was just absent or I just didn't test, So it's definitely a challenging situation. So
yes.
All right. So 2 years ago, I think yesterday, you tested positive for COVID. So take us through some of the journey from there.
Yeah, actually, a couple of things. Yes. So what I think was my confirmed exposure to it was March 8th, 2 years ago. I was in New York City at dance rehearsal. And then I started to get symptomatic on March 16th. I am in Northern New Jersey and I work in Northern New Jersey and New York City. So I'm sure I was exposed to it all over the place 2 years ago. But that's the only known one that I had. So initially that first week was just being run down, body aches, nerve pain, like any of the nerve tension tests were really positive for me. I didn't have a fever, but I felt like I did. Like I would have bet money that I had a fever, but I never did. And as that week progressed, I started to get like some shortness of breath and like some chest burning. I would describe it as like if you full out, I'm a runner, if you full out sprint, like that burning I would get a lot. And after the 6th day, I was like, oh, I'm past it. Like the body aches, just that sick feeling had cleared. So I thought it was good. And then it just got so much worse. It got to the point with breathing, I would get winded and fatigued, like doing something like this, going up the stairs, attempting to exercise. I just started a new job at that point. So I didn't have a baseline to compare it to with work, but it was really hard for me to learn new things for my job, if it was computer based, especially. And then so for work, I was working from home for the first 2 months because of the pandemic. And once we were allowed to, I'm with employer clients, so sort of like an industrial setting. Once we were allowed to get back on site, it just, it got bad fast because I didn't know about that, how much the cognitive demands would be for me. I was meeting lots of new people. It's a really challenging job. I'm outside a lot, so I was dealing with the heat. I didn't know at that point I had autonomic dysfunction. So my autonomic system is not able to regulate, heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature. And things just kept getting worse from there. And thankfully, PTs from the myalgic encephalomyelitis chronic fatigue community had DM'd me on Twitter, seeing my tweets to say, you don't sound okay. Here's what we think is going on, and gave me some really good recommendations. And I had been trying to run. I'd been trying to keep dancing and exercise, and it just was miserable. So I ended up having to stop. I thought I could take a week off of running. This is now the end of August. I thought I could take a week off and I would be fine. And I still have not returned to running. I try here and there, and I just tried on Saturday and it doesn't go well at all. I'm learning how to monitor symptoms and manage them. So like with the autonomic dysfunction, like I have compression socks on right now. I'm always making sure I'm getting electrolytes and staying really hydrated just to try to kind of like help with the blood pressure. I have to, like, say for this as an example, no one's going to do this today, like making sure I have a little bit of time after to like just kind of let my brain rest. It's so complicated. I made a list the other day for the San Diego Pain Summit of all the things that I try to do to try to manage symptoms. So sometimes it's tricky because I don't know if to say like I'm actually physiologically getting better or I'm just getting better at managing the symptoms. Because there are some people who have reported that they've recovered fully. Some people say they're recovered, and then they still have symptoms, or like me, where I say, I think I still have stuff going on. So sort of a surprise every day. We don't always know what it's going to feel like. But yeah, it's like really drastically changed not only how I work, but how I'm able to just have fun, hang out, do things. I can't really run or dance that much anymore. So it's a lot. That's it. The past 2 years have been crazy.
Yeah, so I know that just through our conversations through the years that dance is a huge part of your life. You're an instructor and you've been, doing multiple shows. One of the things that you mentioned here, that it was hard for you to learn new tasks at work. Was that because you were tired or because there was like some sort of mental fog or a little bit of both?
That's a great question. Both. So one, I wasn't appreciating, especially in the beginning, that I was getting fatigued because I've had mono before. So it's like, it's not that level of fatigue. I was just a little, off. And I thought maybe it was pandemic stress kind of stuff. And then, I definitely have cognitive dysfunctions. I know that now. I thought like I was developing ADHD and dyslexia, which I've never had a problem before. Even just learning a new EMR compared to my last job, just so difficult. And it's actually an easier system to use. So that's all the cognitive dysfunction that we're seeing. That seems to be really common. Like I tell this story often that I have a friend who's a PT in a skilled nursing facility, and she's in her early 40s, and she thought she started to develop dementia. And like she knows dementia because she sees it all the time. And it's frightening. And just things were not clicking. Like early in the pandemic, my dance rehearsals were on Zoom and I couldn't learn the choreography. And I've never had a problem picking up choreography before. And it changes day to day. Sometimes I'm very sharp, and some days it like takes me a minute. So I have to write a lot of things down. If it's something new, make sure I write everything down. When I was learning how to do Google Sites, which isn't that complicated, I felt like I was back in statistics class and trying to learn SPSS. So it varies from day to day.
So there's obviously a lot going on. Like you said, you're still learning. You're still in the process. You feel like you still have symptoms going on. And, I mentioned, kind of started off with this, is you're just out of shape, right? Because in a secondary setting, the most thing we're going to hear from a coach, oh, well, he just hasn't done anything for 3 weeks. Of course, he's going to be out of breath. So let's go ahead and jump right into you're just out of shape.
Yeah, this is great. This is so common within athletics, even people with like industrial kind of jobs, dancers, military, law enforcement, all of that, physically demanding things. So, and I've come across, I'll start with a couple of papers that were in JAT, and I just listened to JAT podcast about return to play, just from like just COVID in general returning. And the focus was on like, deconditioning, monitor heart rate, look at how their heart rate's dropping when they stop activity, which is looking for those normal responses. But what we see now with long COVID, and we know this from other post-viral illnesses like myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue syndrome, is I think of it as like the aerobic system is broken. It's not working properly anymore. So you will see, I'll use me as an example, but this is true for so many of us, that like, I kept trying to exercise. It wasn't getting better. It wasn't like, if you literally are deconditioned, you just got to, do a little bit more every day. Trying to progress exercise, you'll see the person, they will crash. They will be so much worse. And not just in that immediate, like short term, like when they finish working out or like a DOMS kind of thing, but for days, maybe even weeks, that they are not recovered from that workout. And we know from myalgic encephalomyelitis, if you, not that ATs have to do this, but if you did cardiopulmonary exercise testing, there's a protocol. People with this will do worse on day 2. So you'll see typical people who are just either deconditioned or just, don't have anything going on. You test them on a treadmill day 1, day 2, they're doing about the same. Maybe they're a little sore, but it's not a huge difference. People that are going through the post-viral illness like long COVID will perform so much worse and will actually have sick kind of symptoms. So not just muscle soreness, but they'll have headaches, they'll have horrible fatigue with the autonomic dysfunction that could cause more of like the profuse sweating that we get, temperature intolerance. And when I say fatigue, it's like literally you can't get up. It's not just that you're a little tired, like you didn't sleep enough before, or just, things are busy. Like it is so much worse than the fatigue I had with mono. So it's like some of the big things you're looking at. And I think what's challenging, especially in the secondary setting when you have kids, they might not be able to verbalize. Like I couldn't verbalize well. Like I would just say my body can't process things. Like it just didn't feel right. And they might not be able to distinguish between I'm just deconditioned for whatever reason, or I'm actually sick. As a runner, I knew something was off because obviously in PT and an AT, I know the difference of what it feels like to be sick versus, just out of shape a little bit. But the response to exercise was not correct. And what we'll see too, and if somebody has a wearable, I know not everybody does, or if you can monitor the heart rate with a pulse ox or just manually check, the heart rate will not match what they're doing. So for me, I can go up a flight of stairs and my heart rate's 120. When I shower, it's 150. That's insane. I used to be able to run at 120, no problem. So you're looking for like responses that don't make sense. Somebody's getting really, really winded and it's not coming down and they just did something light. It's not going to be necessarily easy to pick up on, like, oh, just look at this test and this is how you differentiate. But over time, you're going to see like, are they responding well to exercise? Are they improving the way you would expect? Like you see someone in a preseason, maybe they come in a little out of shape, things are getting better. Or do they actually seem like they're getting sick from exercise? Not an easy sell for coaches, I will say that. It's definitely not an easy sell because we don't have a set test. There isn't a specific diagnostic for long COVID. You can't show them a blood test or an x-ray or something like that. It's just going off of the symptoms.
All right, so you've already talked to a group of athletic trainers in New Jersey there, and I'm sure, some more questions have come up here about this, and a lot of kids do have wearables, but I know that you actually have like 2 or 3 that you've been using to kind of like cross-check. So tell me a little bit about that process, what you've been doing there.
Yeah, early, this is funny. I ended up having to stop that just because one broke. But yeah, so it was interesting to see because I have a Garmin and I used to wear a Fitbit that